Hey traders, John Fortune here with this week's weekly Forex forecast for the 8th of July to the 12th of July 2019. As always, we're going to start off with the US dollar index before running through a number of markets, looking at the key levels of support and resistance in the process. I'm also going to be highlighting some of the targets that we're going to be looking for in the coming week and also for the weeks ahead. So I hope you're having a great weekend. Let's jump over to the charts and see where the money is this week. Just a quick message before we start. I do try and reply to the comments every week, guys. Last week I was unable to, so I appreciate the comments from everyone last week. I do have a bit of a sore throat, as Igor pointed out. I appreciate the comments, Igor, but it's nothing serious. So going into this week, guys, I will try and answer those comments for you as much as possible. But like I said, last week I couldn't just because I was traveling. So with that said, let's have a look at the dollar index. Now, last week we were looking further declines to the downside. We are still structured to the downside in the DXY. We were looking last week actually at the 96.61, which is right here. And you can see this is a great level to look at from last week. Yes, it failed, but this is exactly what we're talking about when we talk about those bearish formations and patterns. You can see actually instead of getting any bearish formations and patterns at this area at the 96.60, we broke straight through it and we actually came back and tested it on the overside here. And then we had a rally from this level to the upside. So we do need to see those reversal patterns taking place first, guys. We don't just short these levels or go long at these levels. We are looking for areas where we're going to get reversals in the market, but we do need to see those reversals take place. So with that said, going into this week, we did trade into another key area of resistance of 97.39 last week, and we started to bounce from this off of these the good non-farm payroll figures we saw last week. We had this rally to the upside. We are still looking overall for further declines to the downside in the DXY. We have not changed our structure, even though we broke above the 96.61. What this does mean, though, is because we broke above that key area of resistance, we've tested 97.39. We may be going into a slightly more corrective structure in the DXY before further declines to the downside. If we can get in this area now, the right bearish formations and patterns, we're going to be looking at initiating shorts down towards the next key area of support to the downside and the target set, and the 96.40. And if we can get a breakthrough here, we're going to be looking down towards the next key area of support to the downside and target 2, and the 95.75. So next market we're going to look at is crude oil. Now we are still looking further advances to the upside in crude oil. We sit above the key area of broken resistance, looking to turn support at the 54.70. If we can get a pullback, and as always, preferably if we can get a pullback and a retest of broken resistance, turning support at the 54.70, this will be a great place going into next week to start to look for those bullish formations and patterns. And if we get the right kind of bullish formations and patterns in this area, we're going to be looking at initiating longs up towards the next key area of resistance to the upside and the target set at the 60.65. And if we get a breakthrough here, we're going to be looking up towards the next key area of resistance to the upside and target 2 at the 62.21. So the next market we're going to look at is euro dollar. Now we start the week sitting at a key area of broken resistance from the past, looking to turn support at the 1.12120. If we can get in this area where we are now, and it's interesting to note that in the euro dollar we're actually sitting at a key area of support right now tested, and also in the DXY we're sitting at a key area of resistance tested from last week. So suggesting that these are two areas, certainly in the euro dollar, that we can start to look for a potential move in these markets. But if we can get in this area, the right kind of bullish formations and patterns going into next week, this is going to be a good place to look to initiate long positions up towards the next key area of resistance to the upside and the target set at the 1.1342. So next market we're going to look at is pound dollar. Now you can see pound dollar is actually still structured to the downside here. We are sitting below a key area of resistance 1.2661. This is opposite to what we were looking at in the dollar index, because of course if the pound dollar is going to decline to the downside, this would be a strengthening of the dollar against the pound. So there's two ways we're going to be looking at this market going into next week. The first is if we can get a pullback. If we do get a sell-off in the dollar index from that key area of resistance down to support, we may see at the same time a pullback in the pound dollar, and then we may get a bounce from support in the DXY, which is where we start to get a decline to the downside in the pound dollar. So that's the first way we're going to be looking at this chart going into next week, despite the fact we are looking for that potential sell-off in the DXY. The second way we're going to be looking at this chart is what we call with our members a plan B currency, which is essentially if the DXY fails at resistance and we start to break higher like this, then we can come to the pound dollar and we can start to look for a potential setup like this, for example. So we will be looking potentially and primarily for further declines in the DXY. However, that could translate into two different ways we could use this currency next week. Either way, we're going to be looking for further declines to the downside in the pound dollar. If we can get a pullback, which is always preferable because it gives us better risk to reward, this is going to be a great place to start to look for those bearish formations and patterns. And we're going to be looking at initiating shorts down towards the next key of support to the downside in the target set at the 1.2477. And if we can get a break through here, or if we start to fail at resistance in the DXY and we just break straight through here like this, this again will be another great place to start to look for declines in the pound dollar, look for bearish formations and patterns. And we're going to be looking down towards the next key of support to the downside in target 2 at the 1.2405. So next market we're going to look at is US dollar Japanese yen. Now, similar to the pound dollar, we're going to be looking at this next week in a couple of ways. As a plan B currency, just as we're looking at the pound dollar. Why? Because any moves to the upside in the US dollar yen, which is how it's structured right now, would be strong dollar, or at least strong against the Japanese yen. And we are looking, of course, we're sitting at that resistance area. So if we do get a decline in the DXY, that would be opposite to what we're looking for here, generally speaking, with a stronger dollar. However, it is still worth noting, as said before, that these can be used in a number of ways, such as synthetic hedging, etc. I mean, if you know how to do this stuff, then more power to you. This is the kind of stuff we teach our members in the live rooms on Monday. But if we can get a pullback in the US dollar Japanese yen, and preferably as always if we can get a retest of broken resistance turning support at the 107.86, especially if we start to fail in the DXY and we start to break through and make high highs, this is going to be a go-to currency in this scenario. And we're going to be looking at initiating longs up towards the next key of resistance to the upside in the target set at the 109.26. So next market we're going to look at is Aussie dollar. Now, last week in Aussie dollar, we pretty much just went sideways. We didn't go anywhere. We are still looking for further advances to the upside in Aussie dollar. So what we'd like to see going into next week, if we can get this pullback, and last week we're looking at a pullback towards the 0.69250. If we can get continued correction into the 0.69250, this is going to be a great place, previous broken resistance from the past, looking to turn support, to start to look for those bullish formations and patterns. And if we get the right kind of bullish formations and patterns in this area, we're going to be looking at initiating longs up towards the next key of resistance to the upside in the target set at the 0.7132. So next market we're going to look at is New Zealand dollar. Now, last week we were looking for this pullback towards 0.66020. You can see we had this and we tested this area almost to the pip and we started to bounce up. So very simply put, going into this week, especially with the DXY sitting at that key of resistance, this becomes a great place to start to look for those bullish formations and patterns. And if we get the right kind of bullish formations and patterns in this area, and we want to see these reversal patterns coming in first, this is going to be our sign to start to look to initiate long positions up towards the next key of resistance to the upside in the target set at the 0.6773. And if we can get a break through here, we're going to be looking up towards the next key of resistance to the upside in target 2 at the 0.6826. So next market we're going to look at is US dollar Swiss franc. Now, similar to the dollar index, although we had this brief rally to the upside last week, we are still looking for further declines to the downside in the US dollar franc, as it is still overall structured to the downside. So we would favor shorts, and if we can get a pullback and a retest of previous broken support, turning resistance at 0.99650, this is going to be the area going into next week that we're going to start to look for those bearish formations and patterns. And if we get the right kind of price action in this area, we're going to be looking at initiating shorts down towards the next key of support to the downside in the target set, the 0.9814. And if we can get a break through here, we're going to be looking down towards the next key of support to the downside in target 2, the 0.9700. So next market we're going to look at is US dollar CAD. Now, going into this week, we are still looking for further declines to the downside in the US dollar CAD. Despite the fact we had that rally in the dollar last week, we didn't really go anywhere. We didn't see a rally to the upside in the US dollar CAD like we did in, say, the euro dollar. And so this, just as a side note, gives you a little bit of an indication as to the strength of the Canadian dollar going into next week when you start to look at some of the other pairs. But very simply put, we are still looking further declines to the downside, especially if we get that sell-off in the DXY from resistance. If we can get a pullback, and as always, if we can get a pullback and a retest of broken support, turning resistance at the 1.3154, this is going to be the best place going into next week to start to look for those bearish reversal patterns. And we're going to be looking at initiating shorts down towards the next key area of support to the downside and the target set at the 1.2958. Last but not least, we have gold. Now, last week we were looking further advanced to the upside in gold. We pretty much just corrected sideways. We would like to see a further continued correction, especially if we can come all the way back and retest the key area of broken resistance, turning support highlighted last week at the 1356.96. Gold is another market where, even though we had that rally to the upside in the dollar index, we did not really see a decline to the downside. So you have to ask yourselves when you're going into next week, if you're looking at the dollar pairs and we do get that sell-off to the downside, what markets are going to move the best? Well, a good indication is the ones where when the dollar index was going up, they didn't really go down, they just moved sideways. So you can imagine when the dollar index, if it does decline, these will have some of the strongest pushes to the upside. So gold is certainly one we're going to watch with a keen eye going into next week. As I said, if we can get a pullback, a further pullback would be preferable because it gives us better risk to reward to the target. But any pullback in this area, we're going to be looking for those bullish reversal patterns. And we're going to be looking at initiating longs up towards the next key area of resistance to the upside and the target set at the 1480.30. So that is it from me for this week, guys. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please let me know by liking, sharing and subscribing. A big thank you to everyone who does that on a regular basis, and a big thank you to everyone who has subscribed to the channel so far. I want to wish you all, as always, a fantastic weekend, and I wish you all the best in your trading next week. The only thing left to say is take care and don't forget to trade safely.